wasn't going to say that's a benefit, but
I'll listen intently to what's going on and say very warm welcome.
sorry, Tim.
Can you see all of us, Tim?
Pardon?
It's Valerie here, Tim. Can you hear all of us? See all of us?
Yes.
Sit here quietly.
Hear but not see.
He can hear but not see. He's on audio only. Yeah. Anybody had their second jab yet? I got mine.
I had mine ages ago.
Got mine yesterday.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I've only just had my first.
I was going to say I got my first on Saturday. So.
Well, it was because I was on COVID duties and I'd got to the about 10-week point since I had the first one. They said, you're due your jab soon, aren't you? And I said, yes. They said, would you like it now? I said, yes, please. So that was done and dusted yesterday.
Good.
Is it the same? Was it the same vaccine?
Yeah, Pfizer. They were doing Pfizer at Morton yesterday. Yeah.
Mm.
So, and Anne's had my Anne's had her second jab as well. She had the Oxford one. So, freedom.
No, it's not. You've still got to be a good boy.
He's never been a good boy in his life.
I'm the world's worst. Right, are we waiting for anybody else?
No, well, just in case somebody comes in.
Mike isn't coming today. He's on COVID. He is Morton today. Yeah.
He is. I was going to pass his apologies on. So yes, we normally get about 20 people watch this as well, Valerie. So, although you've just got our ugly mugs, apart from Carol, of course, you've got our ugly mugs online. But there's more people do watch it. So, with Tim being out of visuals, if it's okay with you, Tim, could I suggest that we make a start since it's gone past? And
yes, indeed, yes. We'll defer any business till after Valerie's spoken. But Valerie, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you fine, Tim.
Sorry we can't see you, but very warm welcome nevertheless. And
very glad to be here.
Pardon?
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Good. And I gather you're going to talk about the Cumbria Community Foundation.
That's correct.
Yes. Are you ready to go now then?
Yes. As I said to Andrew, I've spent my last year doing Microsoft Teams and Zoom calls as a recipient, but this is my first time presenting. So if I have any technical glitches on sharing screens, I hope you'll forgive me.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right. What I'm intending to do, Tony asked me to talk about the Cumbria Community Foundation response to the pandemic. Now, as a lot of you will know, I've been a trustee of Cumbria Community Foundation for, I don't know now, about 8 years or something like that. And, you know, very much involved in what we do. And the foundation has quite a lot of sort of visual stuff on certain things, but because of the nature of the pandemic, I've got less pretty pictures to show you than I maybe would have wished for. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to show a video clip first, which is about 10 minutes long, which gives background about the foundation and what it does. And then I've got a PowerPoint presentation with lots of figures, and I'll talk through very specific things from the pandemic. And then depending on how time goes, I might do another little video clip at the end. So it does mean a little bit of me jumping about between them. The first video clip was done about 3 or 4 years ago, and the foundation commissioned a report which we called Cumbria Revealed. And what it did is it investigated what the issues were in Cumbria. Because whilst the foundation, at the moment, the foundation has something like 28 million under investment. And from that, we actually distribute grants, and we get what we call flow-through money, where money comes into us for a very specific person and goes out in the same year. So we've actually grown really quite a lot. And when people come to us at the foundation and say, where is the greatest need? We, a few years ago, commissioned this report to find out where the greatest need in Cumbria was. And as a result of that, we have this report called Cumbria Revealed, which is absolutely astonishing. So this report came out about 4 years ago. So I'm going to show this first. It's a bit of a background. And some of the figures are out of date because of the fact that we've raised more money and so on since then. costs.
Few places in the UK are as beautiful. Cumbria is home to nearly 500,000 people. It can be a stunning place to live and visit. But this beauty hides some terrible realities.
Cumbria is a real place of contrast. It's a beautiful place to live and work, and over 18 million people come here to visit. But also behind the hills and mountains and those idyllic images, we've got people living on very low incomes and having real significant need.
Cumbria has levels of poverty comparable with some of the worst in the UK. 1 in 8 households earns less than £10,000 a year. 1 in 10 households live in fuel poverty. 1 in 5 people have a long-term health problem or disability. Behind these picture postcard images lie some serious social problems. This really is a county of contrasts.
We have an ageing population. For some of those people, they live on very low incomes. For some of those people, they live in very rurally isolated communities. For some young children, they grow up in families with very little money, with very poor incomes, with problems of obesity and very low educational attainment. Real challenges for people that will affect them all their lives.
Cumbria Community Foundation connects people who care with the causes that matter across the whole of the county, from Barrow in the south right up to the Scottish border. Since 1999, it's given out grants of more than £37 million to thousands of organisations and individuals. Your support is crucial. These grants have transformed so many lives. This is Sheila, and her story is heartbreaking. Sheila suffers from depression. For a long time, she couldn't even leave home.
I've always worked since the day I left school, but it got to the point where the depression just took over my life, and I was under psychiatrists, I went to private counsellors, and nothing helped, nothing, I just got worse. I just wanted to die, I didn't want to be alive.
Sheila joined this project in Cleatermoor in West Cumbria called Home to Work. It teaches new skills like craft making. More importantly though, it provides emotional support and coaching to people struggling to get help anywhere else. This is a rural area where people often feel on their own.
Usually people are very nervous. Often they haven't been out of the house for a long time, they haven't mixed with other people. Some people haven't worked for many, many years. We have people who suffer with depression and anxiety is quite a common feature. People who may have problems with addiction of alcohol or drugs. And some people who are just unemployed and want somewhere to go and try something different. Sheila was in a very sorry state. She shook a lot, she was very, very anxious, she cried a lot. She was really at rock bottom and she felt worthless.
Homelessness isn't obvious in Cumbria, it's largely hidden. But like everywhere in the UK, it is a problem. The Night Stop project, supported by the Foundation, is a fantastic initiative, specifically for young people who, for whatever reason, find themselves out on the street.
The Night Stop project is an emergency accommodation project for 16 to 25-year-olds. We provide accommodation by recruiting and training volunteers in the community who become Night Stop hosts. They then offer a spare bedroom out in their home to a young person in need.
And this is a spare bedroom where young people would stay on the Night Stop project.
And Dolly is one of these people, providing young people in crisis with a safe bed for the night.
There is a gap where young people leave home through perhaps family breakdown, and there really is not a lot of support out there for them. It often is a last stop. They've perhaps been staying with a friend and that hasn't been possible for whatever reason. So it really is a last-ditch attempt to keep these young people off the streets.
It's probably worse than a lot of people would imagine because you don't see it as much. It's not so much street homelessness that we have, it's more hidden. It's more that young people would be sofa surfing and doing that in unsafe situations before they come to us.
This is Terence. He's only 17 years old and he suddenly found himself homeless and desperate.
It was like very daunting, just couldn't cope, didn't want to be around anymore. It just felt as though there was nothing there for me anymore. didn't feel right, to be honest. Just proper horrible and down. I became homeless, so I phoned social services, and social services put me in contact with Night Stop. Night Stop then put me in contact with a host the next day. So the host, we met at the cathedral and we went back to their place and we made tea, spaghetti bolognese. I helped out with that, I washed the dishes. They asked me if I had any clothes and I said not many. And they were like, well, can we by any chance give you any? And I was like, I can't accept it. But she took me upstairs and tried to give me some and I was like, I can't accept it. They were like so supportive, they were very friendly. Couldn't have expected any more of them, they were just so helpful.
With so many households in Cumbria on a low income, poor living conditions and diet are very real problems for so many, particularly the youngest in society. Food banks are now common across the county. An estimated 11,700 children are living in poverty. King's Food Bank in Kendal is providing emergency supplies to so many families, and demand is growing.
It was certainly a surprise to me. Before I started initially volunteering at the food bank, I had absolutely no idea whatsoever that people in Kendal were in such hardship and didn't have any food. It's such a pretty place, the Lake District, and it just appears that everyone's quite wealthy and able to care for themselves, and it just isn't the case. There's the background where people are in desperate need a lot of the time. They're a lifeline to a lot of people. We had a referral the other day for a single gentleman, and he hadn't eaten for several days. I've spoken to him and just the relief in his voice when you ring up and say that we were delivering food to you this afternoon, and it's just like, oh, thank goodness for that. You know, they just don't know often where the next meal is coming from or if there is a next meal coming along. We've calculated recently that probably about a third of the people we supply food to are children, and sometimes we hear of stories where mums and dads don't have any or have very little food, so they would then feed their children rather than themselves. We had a mum fairly recently who had fled domestic abuse, who had 2 little children. Yeah, they didn't have anything at all, actually, nothing at all.
Must break your heart when you see that.
It does, yeah, it really does, yeah. Yeah, you want at least the children to be fed.
Step aboard the wonderful 597 bus here in Windermere. The local bus company decided to shut the service down. For many of the bus's older passengers, it was the only way of getting about.
There's so many people in the district that are isolated, lonely, not necessarily well off, haven't got transport of their own, and this serves that need.
It's a wonderful service. It more or less stops right outside people's front doors and takes them into town. So with the help of the Foundation's funding, the Friends of the 597 was born, run by the passengers themselves.
We came into existence as the Friends of the 597. We managed to keep it going, but it's only because there was a huge amount of local outcry. We can't do without our bus.
The bus is company as well, because you're meeting everybody on the bus. You can hear them all talking, you know. Everybody knows everybody that gets on the bus.
What would it mean to you if this bus service stopped?
Well, it would mean really that I would be housebound unless somebody, you know, like my daughter lives about an hour and a half away, so she couldn't come every day. So it would mean I'd be literally housebound.
The feeling of isolation and loneliness is very real here in Cumbria. 32,000 pensioners live alone across this largely rural county, and by 2020, 25% of the population will be over 65. Cumbria Community Foundation is able to fund incredible and life-changing projects thanks to the generosity of its donors. Without them, so many lives would be entirely different.
Just one example is our winter warmth appeal. There was 1,000 older people were able to heat their homes last winter that wouldn't have been able to otherwise. With the flood appeal, there were 3,000 households that literally would have had £8 million less money were we not here to be a route for people's philanthropy and generosity.
What would be the reality if this bus service didn't exist?
If it finished, they'd just stay at home, basically. They have to rely on family, friends, and it's not the same as having a bit of independence.
There is problems in Cumbria. It isn't just our pretty little place. Knowing that there is people out there, not just for me, for other people as well. Knowing that they'll be there to help other people as well. I'd recommend Night Stop so much.
Learnt new skills. I've got confidence back. I feel like I am somebody.
This is your chance to change people's lives forever. Cumbria Community Foundation believes that by growing philanthropy and us all working closely together, a better future can be built for all Cumbrians. Visit cumbriafoundation.org to find out more.
Right, are we all back on? Fine? Yes? Good, thank you. Right, I'm now going to do a PowerPoint presentation where I'll skip through some bits quite quickly, but I've got some details about exactly what we have been doing in the pandemic. So I'm now going to open that up and then share screen again. Right, I'll skip through the beginning because I've talked about what we do. Basically, the foundation provides philanthropic services to individuals and to families and to organisations. We alleviate poverty through all sorts of things, and we give grants to communities as well as to individuals. A lot of the things that we don't do directly as the foundation. People apply to us and then they actually do the things directly with the individuals in the community. We had our 20th anniversary, it feels like last year, but now it's the year before last. We were created in 1999. I know when I was president of Rotary, it was the year after when I can't remember when it was now, after Foot and Mouth, but the foundation really grew and took off. It was started by some donations from the County Council in Sellafield, fundamentally, and a few large individuals, the Cumberland Building Society. And then it really got noted in the community with foot and mouth problems in 2001, which were followed by the Carlisle floods in 2005.
Yeah.
And that really brought it to people's attention, and donations increased and its profile increased. There's 46 community foundations throughout the UK, so there's an umbrella body which actually helps to give us advice and so on in terms of how to operate. We in Cumbria manage over 100 grant-making funds. So some individuals make small regular donations, but some individuals give us large amounts of money, 100,000 and some even larger, and we then manage that fund for them. In that last video, which I think was done in 2017, it said 37 million grants. We have now passed the £50 million grants. So since 1999, Cumbria Community Foundation has put £50 million of charitable grant giving back into the community, which is a huge difference. That wouldn't have happened if we weren't here. So I've mentioned foot and mouth, flood recovery. So there's been 3 of those, 2005, 2009 and 2015. And we're now just about spent all of our money that we've raised for the COVID-19 pandemic. We did the Cumbria Revealed report, which the video was linked with, and that showed 20-year difference in average life expectancies between our least healthy and most healthy communities in Cumbria, not in the country, in Cumbria. So depending on where you live, you're born and you're brought up, you could live for 20 years longer in some of our wealthy parts of the community compared to some of our poorest parts of the community. There's nearly 12,000 children living in poverty. The next figure I think is astounding. 1 in 8 households live on an income of less than £10,000. That is primarily people who simply have their old age pension and nothing else. 1 in 5 people have a long-term health problem or disability. Child hospital admissions for mental health are significantly higher than the national average, and this is shocking. 1 person takes their own life every week. This is if you're looking at this as an individual slide, this sort of puts things together in a really visual way. 11,000 children in poverty, 1 in 8 households less than 10,000 a year, 1 in 5 people long-term health, 32,000 pensioners live alone, 1 person takes their life every week, life expectancy varies by 20 years, we have 1 in 10 households living in poverty. Some of these statistics are shocking, and this is where we then, when people come to us and say, I want to set up something, I want to make a difference, sometimes it's because somebody's sold a business and they say, I'm going to put 200,000 or something into a fund, what should I do? And we manage it for them, and we talk through them these things, and we can take it from there. Now, these next few slides are very specifically about what we have done at the Foundation for the COVID-19. So we have raised just under £2 million of donations. We seed funded it with £100,000 from our own money. So the first bar on this graph shows Cumbria Community Foundation. Some fund transfers from individual funds that we'd already had. Then a large amount of money, over 400,000 from the National Emergencies Trust. I don't know whether or not you're aware of this, but this was set up about 5 years or so ago. And when there was a national problem, like the Storm Desmond, people didn't know where to send their money. In different parts of the country, should they send it to the Red Cross? Should they send it to the Salvation Army? Should they send it to a community foundation if they had one? And the government set up the National Emergencies Trust in response to that, so that people could send their money to the National Emergencies Trust, and the National Emergencies Trust would then put it back into the community in the places that needed it the most. And with the pandemic, the Cumbria Community Foundation received over £400,000 via the National Emergencies Trust. The next bar on the chart, over 200,000, is the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, which made donations to us. Corporate donations from within Cumbria at just under 200,000. The public sector for various things, over 100,000. Various other charitable trusts in the area, such as the Scott Charitable Trust, transferred money to us, and that was about just under 300,000. And then the largest bar on the chart is individual and community groups who donated just under £600,000. And so all of that together comes to just under 2 million. In addition to that, we repurposed our own funds of just under £1 million to add to the response. This slide shows the grants we've awarded, which is just under 3 million grants have been awarded in Cumbria. And that was the just under 2 million raised plus just under 1 million of our own money. And this graph shows, as we've given it out, a timeline. So from this time last year, 31st of March, like 2020, we made our first grant. And you can see as time's gone on, as the money's gone out, and the fund effectively was paid up at the end of January, and we don't hold any specific money for the pandemic. It's all been spent out. So that's what's come in and gone out. This is where we've spent it geographically. So from the left, we've got Allerdale, then Barrow, Carlisle, Copeland, Eden, South Lakeland, throughout the whole county, not in a specific district, and 157,000 at the end spent outside Cumbria. And that would be where whatever the project we were doing or whatever the donor had specified meant that it had to go to a wider area than simply Cumbria. This is by theme. So this is where the 3 million's been spent by theme. So the first bar is addressing homelessness, 50,000 for homelessness type issues. just under 500,000 for mental health support services, nearly 600,000 supporting carers and care provision, and a huge number of carers needed support in this time. Disadvantaged young children, just under £70,000. The biggest bar though, just over 1 million. Isolated, older, vulnerable people, disadvantaged families, rural issues and food poverty. A whole load of support for people who just could not cope, whether that was through having no money, being isolated, nobody to help them. That was the biggest area. People in financial hardship with challenging circumstances, just under 500,000. People with disabilities, 128,000. And victims of domestic violence and abuse, 88,000. So that's the broad themes by which the money has been spent. Looking at the money by age, if I start towards the top, young adults, about 50,000, just over 1 million of people of all ages, no distinction between the age and where the funds have gone. Adults in the 26 to 65 working age group, 35% of the funds, just over 1 million. Older people, so the over 65s, 496,000. And children and young people, i.e. the school age children, 253,000. So that's shown how the money is being spent by age. Right, I'm now going to try and talk through some very specific examples, and it's just an absolute snapshot of some examples of where the money's gone. Bereavement and psychological support has been a big part. There's a charity called Every Life Matters, and £6,600 was donated to them to expand suicide bereavement support in West Cumbria, and 3,400 for self-harm safe kits across North Cumbria. It's absolutely astounding to me that we need this, but we do. Child Bereavement UK, £22,564 was spent on a bereavement support practitioner for the county. Hospice at Home West Cumbria, £10,000 for new services. And the Cruise Bereavement Care, £3,090 for training for new and existing bereavement volunteers in Carlisle and Allerdale. Carrying on this theme, Outreach Cumbria, £15,000 for the Talk It Out project for Allerdale and Carlisle, so people can get the problem talked about. Always Another Way, £12,000 for alternative and complementary therapy support worker in West Cumbria. Spiral, which is a charity dealing with bullying, young people affected with bullying, £15,000 for volunteer training to support young people affected by bullying. The Laurie Brewers Trust, £3,000.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you very much. I'm chairman of the board of that.
Oh, right. I didn't realise that.
Yeah.
£3,190 supporting disabled young people's mental health as they transition from youth to adult services.
Very valuable.
Good. Now for something completely different, but all of these, this shows the scope and the variety of the projects that we get involved with. Silverdale District Wood Bank. Now, they needed a new chainsaw, and so we funded them for a new chainsaw. And this has a double-edged sword, if you want to look at it that way. It helped in the management of the woodland by volunteers, but what they actually did is by creating the logs were then bagged by the volunteers, which were distributed by local food banks and by Age UK, which helped with the food, with the fuel poverty, people who couldn't afford to heat their homes. And so by helping with the chainsaw, it basically helped the management of the woodland. It helped the volunteers, so they were active, they had something to do, their mental health was better, And the end product, the logs, actually helped people who couldn't afford to heat their homes. So a very well three-dimensional project. This is an example of one of many, many, many sort of food organisations that we helped throughout the pandemic. The community cupboard at Kirby Lonsdale, we funded them with £5,000, which was used for food, for white goods to store food, PPE and training. They had 40 volunteers and they've supported 150 families throughout. They have food club and twice weekly hot meals which get delivered, but they also operate as a food bank. They gather in donated food from bakery shops, etc., which have surplus food, as well as using some funds to buy in food to meet the gaps in what they've got. And that is an ongoing food bank project, but which has absolutely had to expand its services hugely throughout the pandemic. And the largest bar on the graph in terms of where our funds have gone has been in this type of organisation all throughout the county. Various food bank type organisations have been helped. This is another totally different way of looking at some of the problems that people have. We funded £500 from the Kipling Fund for Young People for an online event which was held back in October for an organisation called Anti-Racist Cumbria. And this is current and past, black and brown pupils all contributed. This was set up by them, for them, to deal with what it's like growing up black or brown in Cumbria. And the online event was watched and attended by schools right throughout the county. And as a result of this, 60 schools have since appointed an anti-racist ambassador in their schools. We're a strange county dealing with racist issues because there's hardly anybody here who isn't like us. On all of the boards and things that I'm on at the moment, diversity is a huge issue in terms of how do we diversify our boards? How do we diversify ourselves? And part of the problem is the fact that there are so few people from diverse backgrounds live in Cumbria. And that means it's actually harder for the people who do live here. They get more bullying, more pointed out that you're not like us than they would do if there was a larger group. So this is a really useful, very different from some of the other things that we've supported. In terms of our priorities as a foundation, we set out what our priorities are in terms of how we give grants out. All sorts of organisations can apply to us for grants, but disadvantaged children and families is one of our priorities. Improving life skills, employability is a priority. Vulnerable older people, the range of the county with its geography and its isolation, older people who end up living on their own can be very, very vulnerable and need help both mentally and physically. Improving health and well-being, as you could tell from the Cumbria Revealed report, we have some very poor health statistics in the county. Strengthening fragile communities and enabling people to access arts and sports and culture. Supporting young people, I know that the Rotary also supports quite a lot of people who are shown on this slide. I know that they've been involved with Carlisle Key, and I think the Wheelchair and Sports Club and a number of these, and the Rock. Cumberland Education Foundation is a fund that we have, and within the foundation we have funds, and this part of the fund is looking to help support individuals under 25 who live in the former county of Cumberland, and it supports academic study or the development of practical skills. And with this, we've given grants to young people to enable them to attend sports training in Manchester on a regular basis. If somebody went on to play hockey in the Olympics from Cumbria, and we'd help support them. In an opera singer who had to go to London for their training, all sorts of things that the family found difficult with, and we were able to give them grants from this part of our trust. The Young People's Fund aims to make a difference to lives of disadvantaged people through study or vocational training, and it's individuals aged 14 to 22 living in Cumbria, as well as groups. We get funds from membership fees, direct donations, campaigns, and as I've said, we've got more than 100 grant-making funds. An example of a fund, and some of you might well know Jim and Eve. I know I've known Jim for a long time. Jim and Eve set up the Johnson Fund, and they've said they were particularly attracted to supporting local need in a well-managed and focused way. And it's the benefits of us looking after all of the paperwork and the investment management and the project sourcing and so on, which is where we come into our own. So one of the things the Cumbria Community Foundation likes to say is, we don't just come and say, can we have your money, can we have your money? If you are somebody with money who wants to make a difference, you might not actually have the time or the skills or to know where. You know you want to help, but you don't know how. So we are providing a service to those people who have got the funds to make a difference, but don't know how. And so it's a service we're providing to our donors to help them to fulfill their wishes. One way of looking at it is, if you are wealthy enough that you've actually got funds and you've got an investment manager to manage your investments, you might need a philanthropic manager to manage your philanthropic giving, and that's where we would come in. The Kipling Fund was set up by George Kipling, who lived and farmed at Brough by Sands, and he cared about his community and the rural life, and he left a gift in his will. And as a result of that, there are split into two parts: one the Kipling Fund for older people, and one the Kipling Fund for young people. So that was left as a legacy. So I don't really need to talk through that. So I think we can stop the share. Yeah. Right. I think I'll probably stop there and take questions. I had another little video clip of an interview with somebody who we've given some donations to as a result of the pandemic. But I actually think I've talked long enough, so I think I'll stop there. Any questions?
Well, not so much a question, Valerie, but I was going to say not so much a question, but just a statement. I'm rather shocked by what I've just watched, actually, which I don't usually get shocked by things. I'm used to people coming in, plugging charities and things like that with all sorts of stories, but some of the figures that you've shown there have rather shut my mouth and shocked me. Yeah, it's good to consider it on our doorstep.
I think Tim wanted to say something.
No, I was merely saying thank you very much, Valerie. It's most interesting. Could I just ask this question? Do you think that the COVID situations exacerbated things, problems across the county more than previously existed?
Yes,
there.
Yes, Tim, I do. I think, and I think this isn't just Cumbria, this is everywhere. People who were struggling before and who maybe has been furloughed or whatever will be struggling even more. And if financially the maybe were trying to do, I mean, the number of people who were keeping down maybe 3 jobs to, you know, to make ends meet, to pay the rent and so on. And with with the way things have been, they might have lost a job, they might have been furloughed from a job. All of these things, to actually, the use of food banks and so on has been worse. The one thing I haven't touched on at all, which the foundation has actually done, I haven't got any sort of exact figures on this, to be honest, but we've actually done an awful lot of giving out laptops and devices to school children in schools, so that so that children can actually have education. And people like me, I have a PC that I'm talking to you now. I have a tablet. I have a mobile phone, which I have internet access on. I can access the web and anything from 3 different places. Stuart's in a room next door. We live in a house big enough that I'm sitting here in this room, which is not the kitchen, it's not the sitting room. This room is only where I work. Stuart has a room through there, and he has a room where he works. He has 2 computers in his school's room, one with a direct link to the county council and a web link direct to the county council. It's as if he was sitting on Botchergate. People have 3 kids. They're living in, you know what some of the small houses in Carlisle are like, or West Cumbria. They have 3 kids. Their mum's trying to work at home. The 3 kids are trying to work at home. They've hardly got room for a table to eat their meals on. It's basically normally eat your dinner on your lap in front of the telly. Never mind actually have the kids to actually do this. They don't have all of the laptops. Kids might have mobile phones because that's what kids have. What does it cost for data transfer? If you were actually trying to do your school lesson, not through Wi-Fi like this, but using your monthly data on your phone, it's not just the devices, it's also the cost of the Wi-Fi. The number of people who don't even have Wi-Fi in their home. I can remember when I was in Rotary, her name's gone out of my head, Christine, and she didn't have Wi-Fi. Was she called Christine? She was a nurse, and she didn't have Wi-Fi. And I remember at the time, so this is going back, whatever that is now, since I left Rotary, and she didn't have Wi-Fi. And there are people out there who don't have Wi-Fi. And so when Gavin Williamson, schools minister, is saying, oh, all your lessons are going to be at home, it's not easy. It's really, really hard. And so even when we've actually, as a charity, been able to give laptops to schools who then give them out to the kids, they've got the Wi-Fi issue, they've got the space issue. How do you actually do your lessons when you've got your older brother, your baby sister's crawling around under the table, your mum's trying to do her job at the Cumberland Building Society at the other end of the table? You know, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, we've had, go on.
Well, so I think it is difficult.
Yeah, we've had the same problem with the military veterans who are been isolated throughout, and it's all right giving them an Amazon Fire, whatever it was, 10-inch tablet, but the other half of the problem is connecting it up and getting them into the system, and then educating them how to use it. But we've done that for 4 or 5 veterans around Carlisle, and we've actually had some success, but we've paid for the hardware and they're going to have to pay for the Wi-Fi connection. But it's done well. You know,
it's not even a financial thing though, Tony. I think I think there's a poverty insofar as knowledge base. Just look at our club. We've got 18 members. A third of our, well, between a quarter and a third of our members don't have internet. You know, we do these videos, but I know that several of them actually have the transcripts of the videos effectively read out to them by other members. You know, and that's not a financial situation, but it's certainly a technical.
But the point, Brian, is if somebody's willing to, when you've got an isolated gentleman living out, I won't mention, but certainly living out in Bruff by Sands area, saying, I'd love to know what's going on in the world. I'd love to talk to my kids who live wherever. I'm ex-military. Are you prepared to learn, Albert? Yes, I am. Right. We'll send somebody out with a show you what will happen, Is the family happy to pay for the Wi-Fi connection? Yes, we'll sort that out. And then the computer arrives, the laptop arrives, somebody goes to the house isolated and shows them how it works, and they're as happy as Larry. They really are, because they're prepared at the age of 84 to jump on board with social media. I'm not saying anything about our own members because we're being recorded, but if they pluck up the courage to do it, it's not difficult.
Well, there is the element of personal choice as well, don't forget.
I think my point wasn't so much about the point of that. It's a fact that with COVID, we haven't easily been able to get out to some of these people's houses to actually physically help them. They may have the interest and the wherewithal to do it if they had the opportunity. But I know from some of the discussions I've had with people, not just Rotary, I use that as an example, but there's of a certain demographic, shall we say, a certain age group, where just somebody going into the house because they're being scared of what's going on, going into the house to even help them has been a huge hurdle to transgress. It's been a very difficult time, I think, for an awful lot of people. And without that, they're left in loneliness and isolation. Wow. And it's a horrible time.
Yeah. Valerie, can I ask you a question? There's a fund that comes about this education of people from the Burnbeck wind farm up in the north of the county. Yes. We don't know how much it's used, but there is we keep advertising in the magazine that I produce for the local villages, the fact that there is an educational fund there to help somebody going to university and so on. Do you know how much that fund is actually used? Because
I don't off the top of my head, no.
It assists with bus fares as well, I think, doesn't it? No, I'll ask you later.
I mean, in terms of what, every now and again, I mean, organisations that have links in to the foundation, they'll get an email from us and they'll actually say, we're calling for people to make an application to this fund. So sometimes we get funds that have used up all of their money for their purpose, but then there might be other funds whereby there's not. But if somebody just applied, if somebody applied to Cumbria Community Foundation and said, is there any support to send so-and-so to university or for whatever, further education or whatever it might be, our grant officers, they would know which fund it had to come from. You as the user don't have to work out where it's all going to come from. Okay. So if there was anything at all, and they are really lovely, helpful people, our grant officers. So we have full-time grant officers whose job it is to deal with any question that anybody's got. So if you know anybody that thinks they could do with some support in any way, if you contacted one of the grant officers, and the website's really helpful in terms of how there's lots of things you can click onto on our website. Our website is just www.cumbriafoundation.org. So that's www.cumbriafoundation.org. You don't put in the community bit in the middle. And there's links to how to apply for grants and so on. And if there was any fund that would fit, we would make it fit.
Okay, thank you.
Valerie, can I just ask you another question?
Yes.
Do you have any sort of audit trail of monies that you pay out?
Do you mean afterwards? Yes, we have follow-up. Is that what you mean, Tim?
Yes.
Yes. So this year has obviously not been as easy as normal. But normally what happens is after money has been given out, we will actually select a sample of them and we'll actually have follow-up visits and we'll ask for reports back, or depending on what it is, we'll physically go and have a look and see what's been done. A number of things that we support on an ongoing basis, and we're trying to do this more. We're trying to give multiple year grants. So going back in time, you know, we might give somebody a couple of £1,000 or something with some organisation for something, and next year they'd have to apply again and so on. So if they've actually got a project, we're trying to agree now that we'll give them so much money for the next 3 years, and they'll have monitoring, what we call monitoring visits or monitoring catch-ups and so on. So we do. But it's quite a rigorous process in applying, depending on what it is. But if it's an organisation applying, we want to see their constitution, you know, how they're set up, to make sure there is a proper structure of governance within the organisation that it is.
Yeah.
If it's going to an organisation rather than to an individual.
Good. Thanks. Does anybody else have any questions they want to ask Valerie?
No, I think we're all clear, Tim, from what I can see.
Great. Well, best wishes to you all, and best wishes to all of the Rotarians, whether I can see you on this screen or not, or you're listening later. You all do a fantastic job. And we presumably missed Santa a huge amount this year. I know I missed Santa this year, so maybe it's next year. Okay.
Thank you, Valerie. We miss you from the club as well. We miss you being a member, so it's lovely to see you.
It's lovely to see you all. Bye.
Bye, Valerie.
Bye.
Thank you very much.